York, and Kenny and Casey have been going to the ones in New York, and I've been going to the ones here to talk about the film, and also to thank you guys for showing up for a very small movie. Movies like this are really tough to get made nowadays, and so those of us who still love to go to movies and see movies like this, it really helps when you show up. It sends a signal to Hollywood that we're still allowed to make these movies. So at any rate, this came to pass years ago. I was having dinner with John Krasinski, and he pitched me this idea for a movie. You might have seen he had a story by credit here. He knew that I wanted to direct, and he had this idea for a movie for him to star in. And so when we talked about it, we kind of both decided, well, let's go see if Kenny Lonergan is available to write it, because he's our favorite writer.
And you would appeared in a revival of his play in London.
Yes. Casey and I did This Is Our Youth, which is one of Kenny Lonergan's plays, in London in 2002. Mm-hmm. So we knew Kenny from that experience, and I was in touch with him kind of, socially, and then I had played a part in Margaret in the movie, his second film. But I've always loved his writing, and so John and I went to Kenny and gave him this idea, and he really liked it. But he had a huge backlog of work and things he was on deadline for, and also he was going through the whole lawsuit with Margaret with his second film. There's this whole protracted kind of legal situation. So John and I kind of left him with this idea, and then went and wrote Promised Land together. We got impatient and just went and did another movie together, and kind of forgot about this. And then John had kind of moved on, and Chris Moore and I were the producers on this, and suddenly this script arrived one day, kind of out of the blue, and it was like 150 or 160 pages.
Which is long for a movie script.
Which is long. It's usually 120 pages. Like a minute a page is basically what the standard is, and you aim for 2 hours. So it was long and meandering a little bit, but it was everything that was in this was in that document. It was just like really arresting. It was incredible. And Chris and I I think we gave him notes, so to speak, but I think the notes were kind of like, just keep going. It's really wonderful. And then he came back with his next pass was essentially this film as you saw tonight. It was really an incredible piece of work.
Now, there's so many things I want to ask. How do you made reference to the fact that it's tough to get these movies made, and we all know, anybody who follows the business knows that it is tougher than ever, apparently. How did you get this one on its feet? I mean, Casey Affleck gives a great performance here, but he's but to talk business turkey, he's not a box office star.
Yeah, no, he's a really, and has been for 20 years, been a really undervalued,
absolutely,
actor in this town, and and they have their kind of hard metrics by which they, you're either on the list or you're not, and he's not, or he wasn't, and so basically what happened was once we got this script from Kenny, I called him and I just said, I can't direct this movie. I mean, I would love to, but really, you should direct this movie. This is, and at that point, I think the characters that he'd written had really come alive, and they kind of had their claws in him, and he acquiesced and agreed to direct it. And I said, I'll be in it. I'll play lead. It was really the best role that I've seen, and I see a lot of stuff, and I get sent a lot of stuff, and nowadays, it's mostly, like superhero movies and shit like that. but this was like clear. This was like, it reminded me of like one of Kenny's plays. It was just a bunch of wonderful roles in the piece. And so we went to get it set up. We got it set up, and then I had a hard start date for The Martian, and we were kind of backing into it. And as our pre-production kept collapsing that time, we got to about 5 weeks. And we got on the phone and said, okay, this is kind of, now we're putting you in a position to not succeed. So let's punt. But my next kind of vacancy in my schedule was this February. So this was a few years ago. And at this point, Kenny was ready to go and ready to make the movie. And I said, I've always said the only person I give this to is Casey because of our because I love him as an actor and as a person, but also because of our history with Kenny. And I knew he was just going to crush this thing. And then the question became, okay, but can we get it set up with Case? And the kind of conventional wisdom was no. They're like, in this marketplace, you can't do it. Nobody, and they were almost right because we got turned down everywhere we went, except for we had this kind of miraculous thing happen where a woman named Kimberly Stewart was starting a company called K Period, and she wanted to make great little films with auteur directors, and we went in and met with her, and she gave me a really impassioned plea of like what her business model was and what she wanted to do and the impact she wanted to have. And she, her taste was great and sophisticated, and she just went like, this is it, and she backed us 100%. So this movie exists because of this woman, Kimberly Stewart. This is the first movie she's produced.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's a great story because, we need people like her to come, and we need people like her to come to town and also do well and succeed, and she did. I mean, we sold, Amazon came in and they saw it and they made us a great deal, and Kimberly got all of her money back, and and it's just been a real wonderful triumph for everybody. But it was because this woman, Kimberly, was she's our lead producer, she's our financier, and she was just very courageous to take this on.
Plus, of course, Casey Affleck is perfect. He's perfect casting. It's not just that it's great, in my opinion, it's not just that he gives a great performance, which I think he does, but I can't picture anybody else in that part.
No, I can't either. And it did, I was just emailing with him on the way over here, and some people said, well, he's, there's this distance to him, and there's this, but you have to understand, to play that part, the amount of suffering that you have to do, real suffering. I mean, you can't fake it. You have to live with that every day and go to work with that, and to play that kind of emotional removal in some of those moments, it's not that you're not feeling anything, it's that you're feeling too much, and it came at a cost to him. And he was kind of bristling at some of the, he's getting these incredible reviews, and people are like, he's brilliant, and he's emotionally removed, and he's like, emotionally removed. It's like, I think it was painful for him, quite frankly, and he really, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work.
He has to express so much without dialogue. So much of what he's conveying is body language and just some sort of, almost telepathic communication with the audience. I mean, you have to read so much in his face and his attitude, and just his presence, and he delivers all that.
Yeah, and that's back to just really living it, so really feeling that stuff, so that the movie
I hope he's
works.
feeling better now.
He's great. but you can see that it's not faking it, it's really that, that pain is real.
So what was did you have an active role in producing then, once this got
the best thing I did as producer was remove myself as director and replace myself with Kenny. But no, I mean, once Kimberly came on board, then we were really going. And the big question for them, I mean, whenever you get involved in one of these things, it's always about trust, right? It's about the people with the money and the people, on the creative side have to have some kind of trust. And that was initially, what was in question was because Kenny had brought Margaret in long, right? And we were having this conversation about the length of films,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So sometimes they'll put these arbitrary time limits on a movie. It's got to be 2 hours and 22 minutes, right? And you have to deliver a cut. So Kenny had a cut of Margaret that was at the contractual length, but it just wasn't as good as a longer version. And his kind of argument was, well, I'm trying to make the best movie. I mean, I understand I can hand in this kind of cut that's arbitrarily this length, but it's not as good a movie. Why would we ever want to do that? And so that kicked off this whole kind of legal imbroglio. But so entering into this K period, and everybody was going like, well, we can't give Kenny final cut, because what happens if is he gonna hand in a 4 hour movie?
We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but his previous film, how many of you saw Margaret? I'm just curious. A handful of people, more than a handful of people have seen it, but it's a film that barely got released.
Yeah.
And when it got released, it was several years after it had been completed. And in the version, it stars Anna Paquin and Mark Ruffalo and you and Jeannie Berlin, and a wonderful cast. And when critics finally got to see it, it got some very strong reviews. And then eventually, the version that Kenny preferred was released on DVD and Blu-ray. But that wasn't the first version that we got to see. And there were lawsuits that prevented him from speaking about it. It was all very, very muddled and unhappy, I gather, for what should have been a more celebrated film. So that's the backstory to some of the problems that were feared, that were needlessly feared.
Yeah, that were kind of needlessly eroding, of kind of this burgeoning trust that needed to happen. So basically, the solve was they gave me final cut. Right? For some reason, they thought I was sane, and it was fine, because none of that stuff ever came into play. Kenny delivered a beautiful movie, and my notes to him were kind of the same as my notes on the screenplay. Like, just keep going. You're doing great. And all of us kind of just cheerleaded him through that process. And this is obviously Kenny's cut of the movie.
Yeah. Wow. And it's just something else. Were you involved in the other casting decisions?
I talked to Kenny about, Casey was the big one, and Michelle. We always knew we had Michelle. And so, but I talked to him throughout the casting of Lucas, because I'd worked with Lucas on this little Terry Gilliam.
Lucas plays the boy.
Yeah, Lucas plays Patrick, the nephew. But Kenny is really meticulous about casting, and he knows everybody in New York, and he's in that New York theater world. And most of these actors, even kind of people with 1 or 2 lines, they're brought up from New York, or there's somebody that Kenny knows.
Lucas Hedges gives a pretty amazing performance too. I think he was 15 when they made this.
The character was Lucas is 19.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so he was probably 17 or 18.
Uh-huh. I mean, it's a very mature performance.
Yeah.
And
it's not anything like Lucas either, which is interesting. Like he really is playing a role. I mean, and Kenny talks about that. He's like, this is really, he's a really polished actor for his age.
Apparently he's a very happy, upbeat kid, not at all.
Oh, no, he's great. Yeah, he's like really kind of happy-centered guy, really smart. This is very, very different from him. He's a great young actor.
What a wonderful springboard.
Yeah. Well, if people see it, this is great that so many people are here. I forgot how huge this theater is.
It's a great place to see a movie. Always a great place to see, especially a great movie. Do you have a favorite moment? Is there something that resonates with you particularly in the film?
That's tough to say. There's a lot of. I always love the banter between Lee and Patrick, and but the scene with Michelle and Casey at the end.
It just tears you up.
Yeah,
it just tears you up.
It's incredible. She is so incredibly great in this movie, and again, she's not faking it. You can see in that scene, like it's just an incredibly painful scene, but there's so many moments like that. I just thought all of the actors. Kyle Chandler and Gretchen Mol and Matthew Broderick, and that whole scene when he goes back there. That's just fantastic stuff.
I just read an article today online about the film. It's partly an interview with the editor, and talking about the fact that Kenny he made a decision early on in the writing process not to differentiate the flashbacks from the present day. Not to do them, and the cliche would be that the flashbacks would have a different look. They'd have almost, literally a different look.
Or a title card that says 5 years earlier.
Yeah, there'd be something to distinguish them. And he finally decided to give the audience credit for following what he was doing, because he felt this was the best way to do it. That was his choice and his intention. And you have to pay, of course you have to pay attention, and you have to catch on pretty early on. But people seem to have done that. And,
yeah, no, and it was obviously a big kind of talking point in pre-production for everybody, because it was that way in the script. And I mean, I never felt like reading the script I was lost, but I always felt, well, if I'm not lost reading the script, then I'm sure when we see it, it's gonna like, let's give the audience some credit. This is gonna work out. But it was a bold move.
Yeah, it is. Frankly, if I never see the phrase 2 years earlier again in a movie, I'll be very happy. Because, I mean, I understand you don't want to make movies linear anymore, but now you've created a new cliche. 24 hours earlier, 5 years earlier, 2 days earlier.
5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. They've done it all. It's all been done. As a producer, you should feel very proud. You seem to have, you initiated something that's come to full and rewarding fruition here.
Well, thanks. I honestly look at this movie and I go, someday I'm going to be able to say to my kids, when I had any leverage in this business, I helped to do that. And you're forced to see all these movies that come out. We're in trouble right now. And a lot, and it's great when people come to the theater to see movies that's really the big thing, and thank God for Amazon or Netflix or places like, it's like when we went to do Behind the Candelabra, we couldn't get it made anywhere. We ended up at HBO and we got to do everything we wanted to do there, but no studio would touch it. And
fortunately, both Amazon and Netflix still believe in giving them a theatrical release as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Giving them.
And a good one. This one's going to end up, it's like a platform release that will end up on 800 screens, which is like a great, that's a muscular opening for a little movie like ours, so it's great.
Well, this is every bit of that and more. Matt, congratulations, and thank you for coming tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
Tell your friends.
Please tell your friends.